12 years of marriage. One night, that changed everything. I still ask myself how I missed it for so long, how I sat across the breakfast table from someone every single morning and never saw what was right in front of me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it really began. My name is Callie. I'm 39 years old, and every weekday morning for the past 11 years, I've woken up at 5:15, made myself a single cup of black coffee, and driven 40 minutes down the same highway to the same hospital where I work as a senior cardiac surgeon. It's a small ritual, quiet, mine. My husband Daniel never woke up before 8. I didn't think much of it back then. Different schedules, different rhythms. That's what I told myself. That's what I kept telling myself for over a decade. Daniel ran a private wealth management firm in downtown Chicago. He was charming in the way that certain men are charming, effortlessly and always with an audience in mind. He wore it like a second skin. His clients adored him. His colleagues praised him. And for years, I believed the version of him that everyone else saw. The night everything changed was a Thursday. It was a firm dinner, black tie, the kind of event Daniel had coached me through 100 times before. He would text me that afternoon with a list: what to wear, what not to say, which topics were safe, and which ones would make him look bad in front of the people who mattered to him. That night the list said, "Do not mention the hospital merger." I didn't know why, but I followed the rule. I always followed the rules. We were seated at a long table with 8 of his senior partners and their spouses. Crystal glasses, low candlelight, the kind of dinner where everyone is performing and no one is actually eating. Halfway through the entree, one of the partners, a man named Richard, leaned toward me with genuine curiosity in his eyes and asked what I thought about the Northwestern Memorial expansion and what it might mean for cardiac care in the city. Before I could open my mouth, Daniel cut across me. He laughed lightly, the way people do when they're embarrassed by someone they love. He said, and I quote, "Callie doesn't really follow the policy side of medicine. She's more of a hands-on type." The table laughed politely. Richard nodded and turned back to Daniel. And just like that, I was erased. Not loudly, not violently, just quietly removed from the conversation like a chair someone had accidentally left in the wrong place. I stared at the candle in front of me and thought about the fact that I had spent 14 hours in surgery the day before, that I had held a 62-year-old man's heart in my hands and restarted it. That 3 months ago, I had been asked to speak at a national cardiology conference in front of 400 physicians, and Daniel had just told a table full of people that I didn't really follow the policy side of medicine. I smiled. I picked up my fork. I said nothing. That was the moment, right there. That small, quiet erasure at a candlelit dinner in downtown Chicago. That was when I finally understood what had been happening for 12 years. Because here is what nobody tells you about being married to someone like Daniel. The damage doesn't come all at once. It doesn't arrive as a single devastating blow. It arrives slowly, carefully, in the smallest possible doses. A comment here, a correction there. A gentle redirection that over time teaches you to make yourself smaller, quieter, easier to manage. By the time I sat at that dinner table, I had already been trained. I had learned which subjects were safe. I had learned how to introduce myself without mentioning my title. I had learned to laugh at the right moments and stay silent at the rest. I had become exactly what he needed me to be: decorative, agreeable, invisible. The drive home was quiet. Daniel was in a good mood. The dinner had gone well by his standards. He talked about Richard's portfolio and a new client they were courting and the reservation he'd made for next month's charity gala. I watched the city lights blur past the window and said almost nothing. That night, I lay awake long after Daniel fell asleep, and for the first time in years, I didn't try to push the feeling down. I let it sit there, heavy and still in the dark. Something was wrong, not just with us. Something was wrong with the numbers. I am a surgeon. I think in systems. I think in patterns. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a quiet alarm had been sounding for months that I kept ignoring because I didn't want to believe what it was telling me. Daniel managed all of our shared finances. He had offered to take it over early in our marriage, and I had agreed because I was working 80-hour weeks and didn't have the bandwidth to argue. He handled the accounts, the investments, the tax filings. He sent me a monthly summary that I skimmed and signed. I had trusted him completely, but 3 weeks before that dinner, I had received an automated alert from our joint investment account, a flag I almost dismissed, a transfer I didn't recognize. I hadn't said anything yet. I was waiting, watching. That night, after the dinner, I got up at 2 in the morning, went to my home office, and opened the account portal. What I found made me sit completely still for a very long time. Over the course of 4 years, Daniel had made a series of transfers from our joint accounts. Small ones at first, 15,000 here, 20,000 there. Easy to miss in the monthly summaries he curated for me. But over time, the amounts had grown, and when I added them up, the total was staggering. $340,000, gone. I sat in the blue light of my computer screen at 2 in the morning and felt something shift inside me. Not panic, not tears, something colder and quieter than that. Clarity. I closed the laptop. I went back to bed. I lay beside my husband in the dark and breathed very slowly and said absolutely nothing. The next morning, I called my college roommate, a forensic accountant named Priya, who had spent the last 15 years untangling financial fraud cases for federal prosecutors. I told her I needed her to look at something privately. She came to my office 2 days later. She sat across from my desk with a legal pad, and I handed her 3 years of financial documents I had quietly pulled together. She was quiet for a long time. Then she looked up at me and said, "Callie, this isn't just hidden money." She turned her legal pad around and showed me what she had found. Daniel had not simply moved money from our joint accounts. He had opened 3 separate investment accounts in my name, using my social security number and my professional credentials without my knowledge or consent. He had used those accounts to funnel client funds through a series of transactions designed to look like legitimate portfolio activity. My name was on all of it. My signature forged cleanly on every document. I stared at the papers for a long time without speaking. My name, my credentials, my signature. He hadn't just been stealing from me. He had been committing federal financial fraud in my name, using my identity as a surgeon, a licensed professional with an untarnished reputation, as his cover. The reason he needed me quiet at dinners wasn't embarrassment. It was exposure risk. The more visible I was, the more carefully people might look at the accounts attached to my name. I had not been his wife for 12 years. I had been his alibi. Priya set down her pen and looked at me steadily. She said, "What do you want to do?" I thought about the dinner table, the candlelight, Richard asking me a genuine question, and Daniel laughing me out of the conversation in front of 8 people. I thought about 14-hour surgeries and conference keynotes and a career I had spent 20 years building. I thought about my name on those forged documents. I said, I want every single thing documented, and then I want to make a phone call. The phone call was to the FBI Financial Crimes Division. I didn't go to Daniel's firm. I didn't confront him at home. I didn't warn him. I didn't give him a single opportunity to move assets or prepare a story. I handed Priya's complete forensic report to a federal investigator on a Tuesday morning and went straight to the hospital to perform a double bypass. 7 days later, Daniel was called into a regulatory compliance meeting at his firm. He walked into a conference room expecting an internal review. He found 2 federal investigators and his 3 senior partners waiting for him instead. The accounts were already frozen. The documents were already in federal hands. His partners had already been shown exactly which client funds had passed through accounts bearing my forged signature. I was not in that room. I was in surgery. I heard what happened next from Priya, who heard it from the investigator. Daniel sat down. He looked at the documents. He looked at the federal badge on the table in front of him, and then he asked if he could call me. The investigator told him that wouldn't be appropriate at this time. Daniel was placed on immediate administrative suspension. His personal accounts were frozen pending investigation. 3 of his 4 senior partners moved to dissolve their association with him within 48 hours to protect their own licenses. The 4th partner resigned. The firm that Daniel had spent 12 years building began to quietly collapse in the span of a single week. He was formally charged 8 weeks later, 14 counts of financial fraud, 2 counts of identity theft, 1 count of wire fraud. My name appeared in the charging documents as the victim. The trial lasted 11 days. I testified once, calmly and precisely, the way I testify about surgical outcomes. I answered every question directly and without emotion. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Daniel was convicted on all counts. He was sentenced to 9 years in federal prison. His assets, the ones that could be traced and recovered, were liquidated. A portion was returned to the defrauded clients. A portion was returned to me. On the day of sentencing, I sat in the back of the courtroom alone. When the judge read the verdict, Daniel turned and looked at me from across the room. I held his gaze for exactly 3 seconds. Then I picked up my bag, walked out of the courthouse, got in my car, and drove to the hospital. I had a surgery scheduled for 2 o'clock. A 67-year-old woman with a valve defect that had gone undiagnosed for years. Her family had been waiting since morning. I scrubbed in. I focused. I did the work I had always done. She came through beautifully. In the weeks and months that followed, I thought a lot about what had kept me in that marriage for so long. It wasn't love. At least not by the end. It was something quieter and harder to name. It was the habit of endurance. The belief that if I were patient enough and careful enough and good enough at managing the difficulties, things would eventually stabilize. It's the same reflex that makes a skilled surgeon keep working on a case that has already been lost. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is recognize when it's time to stop the procedure. Not because you failed, because you finally saw clearly. If Callie's story made you feel something, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me. Have you ever stayed somewhere too long because you were too capable of enduring the pain? Have you ever confused your own strength with someone else's permission to take from you? You're not alone in that. Stories like this one exist because too many people are living them quietly. Subscribe to Love Betrayed and stay close. We tell the stories that don't get told anywhere else.